Hi, and welcome to the Grieving with God podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Byington. This week, I have two podcasts that we are releasing. Because my interview with Judith Hardy went so long, and because it was easily divided into two different topics, I have two 30-minute episodes this week. The first episode, we really deal with how to survive the holidays when you're grieving. What might it look like? We both share some stories about our past and how we dealt with heavy grief. The second podcast deals with coping strategies for the holidays. Judith and I talk about ways you can incorporate these strategies into your holidays in order to have a more joyful and peaceful season. I hope you enjoy both of these podcasts. And again, we hope that you like, share, and comment in order for us to get more visible in the podcast community. We would love to start getting some reviews, so as people come to see our podcast, they know what to expect. So if you've enjoyed this podcast or you've enjoyed a particular episode of this podcast, we invite you to go back and leave a comment. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, and welcome to the Grieving with God podcast. I'm Dawn Byington, your host, and today I have with me Judith Hardy, and I have already interviewed Judith about her story of miscarriage and loss, and today we're just kind of co-hosting the episode because it's the Christmas season, and there's always a lot of trauma and grief that seems to revolve around holidays. I remember that growing up as a kid. The holidays tend to be very stressful, and so I figured we'd have a co-hosting, not interview kind of podcast, just kind of talk about the holidays and what to expect. So welcome, Judith. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to start kind of sharing a story that I am focusing on when it comes to grief and death around the holiday season. And then you, Judith, I'd love for you to share a story of yours as well. But in 2017, actually before then, 2016, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and the cancer was all through her body by the time they found it. So it ended up being stage 4 ovarian cancer, and went through lots of treatments. She hung on for a long time. She fought really hard, and about a week and a half before Christmas, she stopped her surgeries because there was not much more they could do, and she entered into hospice. And so at this point of the season, because we had been so wrapped up in getting her to Atlanta, to her procedures there, being home with her, there was Thanksgiving had just passed by. I had traveled for Thanksgiving, and I was just getting home, and she entered into hospice. And so nothing was decorated, nothing was festive. And so it just became this really hard season for our family when she passed away almost an exact week before before Christmas. And so that kind of, I've had a lot of losses in my life, a lot of deaths in my life before that, but that really started a trajectory for me as far as like really diving into grief, how to cope with grief, how to deal with grief, what's healthy. And then especially it being around the holidays, it really made me start paying attention to the holiday season, especially when the year after I was a complete grumpy mess and couldn't figure out why until I went, oh, it's been a year. And so recognizing that grief, it has a memory, and that season will come along. And so just knowing how to navigate that and how to prepare yourself for it, I think that's the point and purpose of today. So Judith, do you have any kind of story about holiday grief or trauma or something like that?
I think so most of our trauma and loss has been in the context of our miscarriages. And so those started back in 2021. And so I think it just kind of started to just change the perspective at which I approached holidays. I think there was a naivete that I used to take into it, just like the cheer, the hope, the excitement. Yes. And it stripped a lot of that because honestly, there just came a point where I was like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Like, I am feeling the need to manufacture this emotion. but I'm really good at faking it. I pride myself on shoving emotions deep, deep down inside until they bubble over.
Yep.
That's something that I really love to do. It's in no way a healthy coping mechanism. And it's something that I've been working through the past 4 or 5 years. But I think I just like forget that it's there. And I agree with you. Like, it's kind of, grief has a memory and grief simmers. And sometimes it's with you when you're not even aware that it's with you. Like, it's just something that you carry now.
Yeah.
And it's a defining part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had actually our last miscarriage, was in December of 2022. We had just found out in November that we were pregnant right after like Thanksgiving, or right around Thanksgiving, with our 5th pregnancy at the time. We had done all the tests, the scans, and then we found out that that baby did not make it. So we ended up having our D&C the first weekend, or the first week of December.
Wow.
And so that was December of 2022. And I honestly don't remember the holidays that year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were very much a fog. I remember like just kind of pasting a smile on my face and just kind of like getting through it.
Yep.
So I don't remember like really, I hate that, but like I really have no memories. I was thinking about, I was like, I really can't recall much of the holidays that year. I think if I look back at pictures, that would be helpful. And I'm thankful I took pictures.
Right.
But I think I was just kind of just trying to get through the holidays. And again, because there's just so much cheer and excitement, and I'm over here like I am, mourning the loss of our 4th child. Like, I am not feeling any of this. But it's so funny because, not funny, but it's so, it just, like when you said that grief has a memory, it made me think, because last night when I was thinking about just stories in the holidays, last December, so mind you, a year removed, so 2020, December of 2023, a year removed from our last miscarriage, we had taken a year to rest. We had taken a year to breathe, a year to like just heal and to walk with the Lord, and just to like give ourselves some space. And I remember at Christmas Day, we were celebrating at my in-laws' house. And there was a lot of buildup. Like my sister-in-law had been married for about 8 months, and there felt like a lot of like buildup of an excitement. And I had mentally like prepared myself like, okay, there might be a pregnancy announcement, and you need to just be ready for that. Like, you need to be ready emotionally, mentally, for like what needs to be going. And it's funny because I really thought I was like good. And so they ended up sharing at the end that they were pregnant. And I remember feeling myself going into autopilot. Like, I was immediately like, okay, don't make this like, it was almost as if there was a second person inside my brain. Like, okay, do this with your face. Say these things, walk up. I remember telling myself, walk up to her and give her a hug. And I just remember feeling so like trapped in that moment of like, this has been a year. Like it's been a year. It has been a good year. It has been a healing year in so many ways. But I think I had been carrying the tension up to that point, and then this just like tipped me over. And I was just slammed with the loss of it. So I remember like we tried to celebrate in that moment, or I tried to celebrate in the moment as much as I could. And then I realized like I have to go. Like I have to go. And then I just remember crying the entire way home from our family dinner because it was such a sweet thing. And even just by the frustration, like part of me was giving myself space for that grief, but also I was so frustrated by the fact that like I can't even be in the joyful moments anymore because my trauma kicks in, my grief kicks in. And I think even that was so frustrating for me. And so it was definitely a very hard way to end the holiday. But at the same time, I think in a lot of ways, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but in a lot of ways, I was also very thankful for the fact that I was like, you know what, like the holidays aren't about the cheer and the excitement. Like the holidays are about like the coming and the restoration of Jesus and in the new Advent and the new beginning. And I felt it so in that moment, like I felt such grief. And in the same token, I was like, this is the realest moment of Christmas for me right here in my sadness.
Restoration seems to be the word that's been coming to me for the past couple of weeks. We actually have a podcast I'm hoping to record in January on that topic. Specifically, I'm going to be interviewing somebody who has found a way through a hobby she created to find healing and restoration of her past grief and trauma. And it is such an incredible story. And that word
Wow.
restoration has come up with her and multiple other people, that restoration is something that God wants to do with us through our grief, through our pain. And so I'm kind of excited about that coming up in the future. So keep listening, guys. Um, so we've talked about, we've got trauma, and I know as a kid growing up too, like you know, growing up in kind of an unstable environment, there were some holidays you're just like, okay, who's gonna flip out first and who's gonna get in trouble with dad first. So there's tension, there's trauma from the childhood, there might be some grief that happened on the holidays. I've had grandparents pass away on Thanksgiving Day, like those kinds of things. And so everybody entering this holiday season, I feel like even my own kids have some kind of baggage attached to it.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to kind of talk about, I think you kind of talked about this a little bit. And I touched on it too, but I think I got two questions that I kind of want to hit here, which is, how do these holidays, how do they amplify these feelings for us who are carrying this baggage? And then in that, is there something that stands out to us regarding the person we're thinking of, or the memory that's tied to this baggage, that maybe there's some way we can honor it or address it, or bring it to God and let him take it from us?
Yeah.
So yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think because I grew up in a context where I only had one grandparent growing up. All the other ones that I had were already gone, had already passed away. And so I didn't have a lot of trauma surrounding the holidays until the past maybe half decade. And so I think a lot of it is like there's an expectation that I feel like comes with the holidays.
Yeah.
There is an at times artificial need or desire to like create a memory or to do check a box. Like it's in commercials, it's in the movies you see, like it saturates everything. Like this is what the holidays should look like. And then you're encountering, well, this is what the holiday looks like for me. And sometimes they're very different experiences. And so
Go ahead.
So I think like for me, what I have seen is that the holidays post feeling more the grief and the weight of not just unmet expectations, but just grief and sorrow. It's just a time of year where it's just harder. It's a harder time because there's this expectation of we're going to do these things. It's going to be joyful and jolly. And, we're going to be spending time with family, and all of these things that make it so joyous are now reminders as to the loss that I have. And so it feels like now all the things. Go ahead.
I think that word expectation, I think that's an important word. There's an expectation that comes with the holidays. It should look like this. It should feel like this. We need to do X, Y, and Z. The kids need to behave.
Yes.
Desserts need to be perfect. When in reality, we're not feeling that. If we're carrying this grief and we're carrying this baggage, that's not how we're feeling. And it's like putting on a mask. It's faking it. It's just making sure everybody else is comfortable. Even though we may not be comfortable, we may be upset and frustrated or grieving even deep losses. And we can be doing that silently and nobody really knows or sees. Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly hard, especially like when you have a family, when there are certain expectations that either your family, and like I know for me, Christmas growing up has always been like this magnificent, joyful, family-oriented time of year. And so inadvertently, that is an expectation that I have put upon myself that then I am failing to meet because I'm not feeling those things. And by leaning into these things, I'm almost more reminded of the loss that I have. And so I'm trying to live in this dichotomy of like, I have to meet these expectations. I have to make this experience for me, my family, for everyone in proximity to me. And yet inwardly I am falling apart and I don't have the space that I need. And I think too with the holidays, there's just like there's already there's an uptick in everything. There's an uptick in expectations. Your schedules are busier. There's just so much demanding your attention,
Yeah.
whether it's cooking for a meal or buying presents or, and more things on your schedule. And I think it like leaves less of a margin for you to even acknowledge like this is happening. I have this grief that I'm not addressing.
Yes. And I want to jump on that idea right there, that we're not leaving any margin for ourselves to grieve. And we kind of feel like we're kind of trying to squeeze that pain and that grief to the side.
Yeah.
Let me
Mm-hmm.
be this fake, enjoyable person for the holidays. But, and so that leads into the second question, is how then can we, instead of squeezing this aside, pushing it away, how can we bring that memory, if, especially if it's a person or a situation, to the forefront in a way and honor it?
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to say was, with how feelings are amplified for me during the holidays, like I said, my mother passed away a week before Christmas, in 2017. And so every Christmas there was just this, amplification of the sadness. She's not here. She loved
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah.
So, I'm walking around in this and I'm thinking, do I go to Christmas when we had Christmas a week later? And I'll tell a little bit more about that story in a little bit. Do we be joyful? Do we rejoice as we're all sitting here with the obvious absence of my mother, all my aunts and uncles and cousins and everybody there? Like, how do you navigate that when that person is not at the table? And so how can we bring this to the forefront and honor it and honor our grief and give it space to be grief? When we did the Thanksgiving podcast, Kelsey Sanders had mentioned that one of the things that she likes to do is to just give her, and this isn't honoring it in a public setting, but it was honoring it in her heart by having her husband be a buffer for her in the situations and the holiday celebrations, to say, hey, you need space. You need to go take a walk or go read a book or do something for yourself right now. Get away from the crowd. You have no obligation to the holiday festivities right now. You need a break. And that is, in a way, honoring your grief.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I have found it very helpful because we have one physical representation, which I think is very helpful for me, especially around Christmas time. We have a Christmas ornament that was given to me a few years ago by my sister-in-law. And it just has a verse and a poem. And basically the long and short of it is just, a moment here, but forever on our hearts. And then it had, at the time, the 2 miscarriages we had represented. And I remember in that moment realizing, like, I need to acknowledge and have space for these emotions. I need to acknowledge and leave space for acknowledging and being honest with myself, because this is a presence that's very present with me for the holidays. Like, my babies are present with me on the holidays. And by me not allowing myself the margin to acknowledge them, all I'm doing is harming myself and I'm not honoring them. And I think that was very helpful for me in Christmases that have come since, just knowing like that ornament is there.
Yep.
And that ornament there is a physical representation of like my babies. Like, my babies are present here.
Yep.
And then I can honor them and I can grieve them. So every year, like I just did it a few weeks ago, we put up our Christmas tree and I get to that ornament and I'm doing it now. Like, I cry every time. It immediately provides me the space to grieve, but also like honor them in a small way. And just know like they're not forgotten. Cause I think especially with grief around the holidays, that's like the ever present, like, I'm feeling this major gaping wound. Is anybody else feeling it with me?
Right.
And even just knowing that I'm giving myself the space to grieve and I know exactly where on the tree that ornament is. I put it to where I know where exactly it is.
Yep.
And so that's one physical representation. And then I do something very similar I've learned to do something similar. The first couple years, I was not as good, and instead, what then happened is I exploded a lot and just cried in corners, secretly, quietly. Um, but I have myself, my husband Matt knows to check in on me, and he knows he reads me very, very well. And then I make myself during the holidays take time with friends, and just have open conversations with them and ask them like, hey. I might just need I might need you to be checking in. Like, this is going to be a hard space for me. Can you check in with me afterwards? Or this might be hard. Can you check in? Like, I remember last year after hearing my sister-in-law's pregnancy announcement and immediately having like conflicting emotions blowing up, I immediately reached out to my support network and I was like, hi, this is what I'm working through right now. I just need you guys to like hear what I'm walking through.
Yeah.
And I think just having a space where I can put aside the often what feels like fabricated and expected jolliness and joy, and just set it aside and say, hey, I understand that this is what the season is. And right now I'm feeling angry and heartbroken and upset. And I just need a safe space in which I can do that and just process that. Yeah. I think for me, that's been very, very helpful, knowing that I have those people in my life that I can turn to that do provide a bit of a buffer, or are there at a moment's notice. Because I never know. I know. I'm sure you've seen this where like sometimes I can mentally prepare myself, and then there are some times where I'm like, was not ready for that one. Like, don't know where that came from. And it's here now, and now we need to work through it.
Oh yes. In the same token, we have several ornaments for Ezekiel, but we decided it was a couple of years after we lost him. We lost Ezekiel a month after we lost my mother, so it was like a double whammy holiday season for us. And so we were like, how do we honor the fact that we should have had a child with us for these holiday seasons? And here, I think it was the second year, and we came up with the idea of we had bought a second Christmas tree, fake Christmas tree, and that is our Ezekiel tree. And so we bought ornaments. So it was like white magnolia flowers. It's decorated all in white and gold stars. Someone gifted us little angel wings to go on the tree. And then there are some ornaments that people have given us that have Bible verses on them. I made an ornament the year he passed away. There's a star. And so that's on the tree too. And we do the star because years ago, when I love the book, The Little Prince. And when I read The Little Prince when I was pregnant with Ezekiel, it really touched our hearts because it was almost like the story was about someone who lost someone. That when you read the whole book, The Little Prince, you're like, you get to the end and you're like, this person lost someone. And at the end, as the little prince is going away, he says to the aviator, don't be sad. Just look up to the stars. That's where I'll be. And you're just like, oh my goodness. And so that's what we did. We decorated his tree. And so we have our Ezekiel tree every year in the corner. And that's how I feel we honor it. We say this is our child and he should be here with us. And it's how we're celebrating the season with him. And not everybody in my family kind of knows it or gets it or understands it or whatever, but we're like, it's what we do. So it's the way we honor them. But anyway, so I think those little moments, those little remembrances, things that we can do to honor that person or that memory, and then also honoring our own selves, giving ourselves space and a break, and letting ourselves grieve. I feel like in America, I feel like we're getting better. I see it every day. I see evidences of it getting better. But I feel like in America, it has been, we don't talk about that. It's a happy season. We don't bring that up to the table. You be quiet about that. You grieve in your closet and, we don't talk about it. But I think we're getting better. We're getting there.
Well, I think some of that stems from and this is something that I'm sure you've encountered, which is, and I know I've been guilty of it too, where like, I don't know how to necessarily engage someone in their grief.
Yeah.
So when I see their grief, especially before when I wasn't very familiar with it, I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't feel prepared for this. So I feel like a lot of that has stemmed from like, as a culture, we are not sensitive to it and we are not emotionally or mentally prepared or we just don't encounter it a lot. And so in turn, we clam up and we just, like you said, we shove it in a closet. We're like, please don't bring those very confusing emotions or that dark sentiment to the season because we don't know how to process it. And I am thankful to see that there seems to be a general shift of things being spoken about so much more, and just helping people learn how to engage others in their seasons of grief. But I think that there is still very much like for someone who either hasn't encountered it or has no, or doesn't engage, it's just very challenging. So I think culturally we've just shut it down.
And so it's true. If you haven't experienced that particular grief or grief in general, you don't have a context to really understand what that other person is experiencing. So the sad thing is we empathize because we have been there, and so it's important. Like I try to teach my children healthy emotional awareness so that even if they haven't experienced something that they can question and say, well, I don't understand why that person is reacting that way, but let me find out why they're reacting that way. Let me watch and observe and ask if they need help in some way. So another question that I had here was a time when the holidays felt particularly challenging. And I did want to share this because I feel like this was when my mother passed away. It was the week before Christmas. She's in hospice. Her house is not decorated. This woman, my mother, lived for Christmas, loved Christmas. I mean, bins and bins and bins of decorations in her attic. Her house would explode in color and huge, the biggest Christmas tree she could find. Her yard was littered with decorations and lights, and the trees were always, I mean, so many Christmas presents. I mean, sometimes from the dollar store, but still, like, she wanted to make sure we had tons of stuff to open. And so it just felt so weird the day that she passed away, that we were all there. She passed away. We left hospice, which is a very strange thing. If you've ever had to leave, I've had to do it twice, 3 times. I've had to leave a place where someone I loved had died, and I'm leaving that person there, and they're not coming with me. It's a very strange feeling. It's very weird to like, I'm not taking this person. It was very strange. So we left my mother at the hospice house. We all go to her house, and we're just sitting there in the living room like, what do we do? Nobody was talking. Everybody was crying or upset, or my kids were like quiet because they were petrified. They were young too. I mean, 12 and 10. And I don't know who it was that decided, but they said we started decorating her house. So we got the Christmas tree. We got the poinsettias. I got as many poinsettias as I could to fill her fireplace area. My son put up her little Christmas village and lit it all up. And I have pictures of us setting up her home. We're all quiet. Nobody's talking. It's the weirdest thing. But we're all just like setting up her house to celebrate Christmas. And it just felt so right, but it was so challenging because like there's about 10 of us there, and we're like, we're not talking. So we're all grieving, we're all sad. And then come Christmas Day, we're all like, okay, this was good, this is therapeutic. We kind of process some grief together silently. So we're going to come together for Christmas, and we're going to have Christmas. And honestly, like, Christmas was joyful. And we honored my mother. We opened her presents first because she had bought presents for all of us. And so we made a point to open her gifts first and share with each other. And I think we even shared like a memory we had of her to everybody as we were opening gifts. And so situations like that where a loved one has passed away on or before or just prior to a holiday, it can be very awkward and it can be very tense, but I just praise God that we were able to be joyful and we were able to celebrate Christmas, I think the way she would have wanted us to, together. Absolutely. And talking and laughing with each other, and we weren't fighting. We
weren't fighting.
We weren't fighting. So that was probably the hardest the hardest holiday I've ever had to go through.
Yeah.
So do you have anything, I mean, I know we've kind of talked about that, but do you, even in your childhood, any memories of like awkward holidays or things like that you've had to navigate, or situations like that?
I think not that I can recall specifically in regards to like the grief that I was feeling.
Mm.
I think as a family, we are navigating that a little bit. This is my aunt passed away in April of this year, and she left behind 3 adult children
Mm.
who all live in the area, which I'm very, very thankful for.
Nice.
But so we have started celebrating firsts without her.
Oh, yeah.
And that's been hard. And like you said, grief makes you, once you've experienced grief, it makes you an empath. And so even just watching and walking alongside my cousins through this grief of, you know, the first Mother's Day without their mom. The first, we just had the first Thanksgiving without their mom. We're about to have the first Christmas without their mom. And so I think everyone recognizes there's like this tension of, we know that this one carries weight differently, that this is different, that for now on Christmases and holidays for them will carry differently. And I think it was funny because I actually had the thought, like, because I was engaging some of my cousins, and I was thankful for the fact that since I am familiar with grief, while it's not the same, I can sit there and be in a space with them and engage with them.
Yeah.
That I feel that sometimes other family members did not feel like they could be in.
Right.
You know, and I think even just giving grace, recognizing, like, you know, because like you said, it's the first one, you know, because emotions are high.
Yeah.
The temptation to, that grief sneaks up on you, that anger, that frustration, and then it could potentially lead to confrontation. And I think I've been thankful for the fact that the Lord has given me like a sensitivity to be like, you are aware of this. And so like not allowing it, like trying to help almost be like a liaison for family at times, to be like, hey, this is why we're going to invite this in. This is why this is the conversation that we're going to have. We're going to allow them the space to come or to not come if they want to come.
Oh, I love that.
We're going to allow them to kind of engage this holiday and give them an overwhelming amount of love that they need to feel, but also allowing them the space to withdraw if they need to withdraw. And again, I think that that's something that I, even after Thanksgiving, was just so thankful that the Lord had given me that perspective, because I felt like I was able to engage in a way in a year that I know for my cousins has been very, very challenging. For all of us has been very, very hard without my aunt. We're all feeling the tension of that. You know, I just made Christmas cards out and I didn't address one to my aunt. And that was the weight that I felt. And I know they're feeling that tenfold, you know? But I think just I'm thankful for the fact that like I've been able to engage in that way. But I think I have felt that tension this year of like, how are we going to engage the holidays? Because the holidays are new now. Like there's not, it's been many, many years since my family has had a significant, you know, physical loss like this. Like they've sat with the losses of my miscarriages over the past 4 years. And that for them is a new space, even for them learning to navigate that and what to say and what not to say. And do we lean into it? Do we not lean into it? That was, even just watching them navigate that was very, very hard and challenging on my side. Because again, I didn't want to be the one forcing this upon them. And I do think I think for everyone, there was a level of tension of just like learning what to say, what not to say. And then just recognizing like with that comes like giving a lot of grace and wanting to honor the memories. So definitely it's been one of those things where I see it more and more, especially as I get older, because, you know, as you get older, the grief comes in waves, and it just, you know, it's, I think I'm losing a lot of that, you know, tinsel and joy and jolliness of the earlier holidays, because we are encountering more of losses. We are encountering more of the brokenness of everything around us. And so it does make the holidays harder.
I like what you said, and I want to kind of touch back on that point from, you know, taking a different perspective. Instead of, you know, looking at us, okay, we're the ones who are grieving, but looking at the other person who's grieving during the holidays. And you said something about giving them space to be sad. And there was something about expectations, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they don't come, or giving them that. And I think that that is a key point for people who are also navigating the
Yeah.
holidays with someone who might be grieving. And maybe you're not grieving in the same way, or that they lost someone you didn't. I think that entitlement, and I use this word carefully because I know it's touchy for some people, but we do have an entitlement when it comes to the holidays. I know I do. I
Yes.
say, this is the way I want it to be, and it should be this
Mm-hmm.
way. And so when people don't live up to that expectation of my entitlement, I can get a little crabby and a little mean about it. And I think that, especially if we are in an environment where there are other people, like you said, navigating the conversation, maybe there's some topics we don't talk about, and maybe, kind of touching that one person, saying, oh, no, 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 Uncle so and so, we're not talking about that today. you know
Yeah.
to just say, hey, let's steer the conversation in a different way. So changing our expectations,
Yeah.
lowering our entitlement, and
Yeah.
just giving grace and empathy and a warm and loving
Absolutely.
space for somebody who's grieving, because the
Yeah.
holidays are hard. They're going through, like you said, oh my gosh, I mean, I remember all those firsts. The
Yeah.
first Christmas, the first Easter, the first birthdays, Mother's Day, like that
Mm-hmm.
first year of grief is
Yeah.
more than challenging. I can't even
Yeah.
describe it.
Yeah.
And so as you're navigating that after losing a parent or someone very close to you, whether, some people are very close to their grandparents, um,
Mm-hmm.
giving them that space to have a warm, loving environment to accept them as they are, as they're grieving, and even giving them space, asking them, hey, a question about their loved one, or giving them space to cry, or
Yeah.
saying, hey, there's a little room off the corner of here. If you need to get away,
Mm-hmm.
that's open to you. Like letting them know, hey,
Absolutely.
you can wander the house and go do what you need to do. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's really a loving way, um, to empathize with someone else, and to come alongside them.
Yeah. I think it's just like kind of giving someone the permission
Mm.
and like going ahead and acknowledging the elephant in the room.
Yeah,
This is a major loss in your life.
right.
Because I think so often we just kind of tiptoe around it.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, just kind of approaching it head on and being like, I recognize this is hard. I am giving you permission to walk through this. Like you said, removing my entitlement or my expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and instead saying, you navigate this however you need to. Because for some person, it may be that they don't need to show up at a holiday dinner, they don't need to be there to be reminded. For somebody else, it may be that they just need to have a space where they can go and just have a moment of quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I know even last year when I had that moment after my sister-in-law had shared her pregnancy announcement, I remember just being on autopilot for a few minutes and just being like, okay, I felt like that survival mode. And my sweet sister-in-law approached me, my other sweet
Mm.
sister-in-law. In that moment, she just kind of had taken me aside just slightly and she looked at me and said, hey, and just acknowledge like I know this must be hard for you. And in
Mm-hmm.
that moment I remember like it was almost like a lifeline of like I can feel what I'm feeling, like I don't have to necessarily bury it. I
Yeah.
This person is giving me this safe
Permission.
space,
Yeah.
permission. Yeah, they're giving me permission, and they're acknowledging that what might be the expectation of the emotion of the moment is not what I'm feeling, and it's okay. And I just remember looking at her and being like, I can't talk about this right now or I will be openly bawling. But I felt so seen and so loved and so cared for by her simply saying, hey, I recognize that there is a lot of heartache that comes with this. And I just want to say that I see that. And
Mm.
in that moment, I just felt like the permission to acknowledge it, even in myself, to be like, you're right. And even if it doesn't mean like I have all the space that I need, I just having that moment where somebody gave me permission to feel something differently than everybody else in the
Mm-hmm.
room
Mm-hmm.
was
Yeah.
just such a lifeline to me. It felt like such a lifeline to me. It was the greatest gift because it gave me what I needed
Yeah.
just to come and continue through the evening.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, that's I love those. I love hearing that. That's amazing. Thank you for joining us this week on the Grieving with God podcast. I hope to see you again at our next episode that should be releasing sometime this week. And I hope that you and your family have a beautiful, wonderful, safe holidays.